The rain hammered against the diner windows. The night Marisol Vance's entire world balanced on the edge of a coffee pot and a folded napkin. She had worked the graveyard shift at the Blue Pelican Diner for 3 years, long enough to recognize Trouble walking through the door before it even took off its coat. That night, Trouble wore a charcoal gray suit and sat in booth 7, flanked by 2 men who never touched their menus. Everyone in that part of town knew the name Dominic Reyes. They knew what he did for a living, and they knew better than to look at him too long. Marisol had served him coffee a dozen times without incident. But tonight was different. Tonight, as she refilled his cup, she caught the reflection in the window behind him, a man in a black hoodie easing toward the back exit, one hand tucked inside his jacket where no hand belonged to rest so still. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She had seconds, not minutes, to decide what kind of person she was going to be. Before we go further into Marisol's story, if you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the quiet courage of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, hit that like button, drop a comment, share this video with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to Shadow Boss Tales so you never miss a story like this one. And I'd love to know, where are you watching from tonight? Type your city in the comments, I read every single one. Marisol had grown up in a house where survival was a skill taught earlier than reading. Her mother cleaned office buildings at night, her father had left before she could remember his voice. By the time she was 19, she was raising her younger brother, Eli, on tips and prayers, working double shifts at the Blue Pelican just to keep the lights on and Eli in his community college textbooks. She wasn't naive about the world. She knew men like Dominic Reyes existed in the shadows of every city, men whose hands built empires out of fear. But she also believed, stubbornly, foolishly perhaps, that everyone deserved one honest moment, one chance to be more than the worst thing people assumed about them. That belief was about to be tested in the space of 30 seconds. She could have frozen. She could have quietly slipped away, pretended she saw nothing, let fate decide the rest. After all, nobody would blame a waitress for staying out of a mob boss's business. But something in her refused to let a man die feet away from her section without lifting a finger, even a man like Dominic Reyes, even a man whose name alone made grown men flinch. So Marisol did the only thing she could think to do without drawing attention. She grabbed his bill from her apron pocket, clicked her pen twice like she always did, and instead of writing the total, she began circling words already printed on the paper, the diner's slogan, it's ours, random letters from the fine print, piecing together a sentence only he would notice if he looked closely enough. Gunman behind you. Deal gone wrong. Exit now. She set the bill down in front of him with trembling hands, forced a smile, and said, in a voice far steadier than she felt, take your time, sir. No rush at all. Dominic's eyes flicked to her face for half a heartbeat, unreadable, and then down to the bill. She watched the exact moment his jaw tightened, the almost imperceptible shift of his shoulders as 40 years of survival instinct kicked into gear beneath a calm exterior. He didn't look toward the back exit. He didn't panic. He simply reached for his coffee cup with his right hand while his left slid beneath the table, and in one fluid motion that most of the diner never even registered, chaos erupted. The hooded man lunged, a gun rising from his jacket, but Dominic was already moving, already turning the booth into cover, already shouting an order to his men that sent one crashing into the shooter before a single shot could be fired cleanly. The gun went off once, embedding a bullet into the ceiling tile above the counter, showering dust and screams across the diner. Chairs toppled. A woman near the window dropped to the floor, shielding her toddler with her own body. Marisol herself was yanked backward by Dominic's bodyguard, pulled behind the counter as the scuffle by the back exit turned violent and short-lived. Within 15 seconds it was over, the gunman disarmed, subdued, and dragged toward the kitchen by 2 men who moved with terrifying efficiency, men who clearly had done this before. When the sirens finally approached in the distance, called by a customer who'd dialed 911 with shaking fingers, the diner sat in a stunned, ringing silence, broken only by someone quietly sobbing near the register. Marisol realized she too was shaking, her apron damp with spilled coffee, her knees barely holding her upright. That was when Dominic Reyes crossed the diner floor toward her, his expression unreadable in a way that made her stomach twist with a fear she couldn't quite name. He didn't say anything at first. He simply held up the bill, the circled words still visible in blue ink, and studied her face like he was trying to solve a puzzle he hadn't expected to encounter that night. "Why," he finally asked, his voice low, "would you risk your life for someone like me?" Marisol swallowed hard before she answered, surprising herself with her own honesty. "Because nobody deserves to get shot in the back over coffee," she said. "Not even you." For a long moment, Dominic said nothing at all. Then, quietly, almost to himself, he said that in 20 years, no one, not his own men, not his own family, had ever done something for him without expecting anything in return. The days that followed changed the shape of Marisol's life in ways she never could have predicted. Word moved fast in certain circles, and Dominic Reyes was not a man who forgot a debt, especially not one wrapped in kindness rather than fear. He returned to the Blue Pelican 3 nights later, this time alone, dressed down, almost unrecognizable without his usual entourage. He asked about her brother. He asked about her mother. He listened, really listened, in a way that unsettled her because dangerous men weren't supposed to listen like that. Before he left that night, he placed an envelope on the counter, told her it wasn't charity, it was gratitude, and asked her not to argue with him about it, because, for possibly the first time in his adult life, he wasn't negotiating. Inside was enough money to cover Eli's tuition for 2 full years. Marisol wanted to refuse it. Every instinct told her that nothing from a man like Dominic Reyes came without strings attached. But when she tried to return it the following week, he simply looked at her and said that some debts weren't about business, they were about being seen as human again after decades of being treated as a weapon or a threat. He told her that the attempted hit that night hadn't been random, a rival organization had been circling him for months, waiting for an opening, and her small act of courage hadn't just saved his life, it had likely saved the lives of everyone in that diner who would have been caught in whatever crossfire followed if the ambush had succeeded elsewhere, Messier, with less warning. She had, without knowing it, changed the outcome for dozens of people that night. Over the following months, an unlikely, careful friendship grew between them, built not on his world of violence but on quiet visits, honest conversations, and Marisol's refusal to be intimidated by his reputation. She learned that Dominic hadn't chosen the life he lived so much as inherited it, born into an empire built by his father before he was old enough to understand what a single wrong choice could cost. She learned he had a daughter he rarely saw, a marriage that had crumbled under the weight of secrets, and a loneliness so deep it had calcified into the cold exterior everyone feared. And slowly, almost without either of them noticing, Marisol became one of the only people in his life who spoke to the man rather than the myth. Then, 6 months after that rainy night, everything came to a head. The rival organization, having failed once, made one final desperate move, not against Dominic directly this time, but against the diner itself, hoping to send a message by targeting the one place he had shown was important to him. Marisol received a warning of her own that night, not from an anonymous gunman, but from one of Dominic's men, urging her to close early, to take Eli somewhere safe, to trust that Dominic was already 3 steps ahead of the threat. And he was. What followed wasn't violence but resolution, a tense, quiet negotiation brokered through channels Marisol never fully understood, ending not in bloodshed but in an uneasy truce, because Dominic made it clear, in no uncertain terms, that the diner and everyone in it were now under his protection, permanently, absolutely, and non-negotiably. If this story has touched your heart even a little, if you believe that one small act of courage really can change the course of someone's entire life, please take just a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs a reminder that kindness still matters, even in the darkest corners of the world. In the years that followed, the Blue Pelican Diner became something of a quiet legend in that part of the city, a place people spoke of in hushed, reverent tones, though few ever knew the full truth of what happened that rainy night in Booth 7. Marisol never became wealthy, never sought fame or recognition for what she'd done. She kept working, kept serving coffee, kept raising Eli, who went on to graduate and build a life free from the poverty that had shaped his childhood. But something had shifted permanently in her, a quiet confidence, a knowledge that she had faced the worst possible moment life could hand her and chosen compassion instead of fear, and that choice had rippled outward in ways she could never have imagined. Dominic Reyes, for his part, was never fully redeemed in the eyes of the law, and this story doesn't pretend his world became suddenly clean or that violence disappeared from his life entirely. But something in him softened permanently too. He began quietly funding scholarships for kids like Eli. He pulled back from the more brutal corners of his business, delegating what he could, distancing himself from the bloodshed that had defined his younger years. He visited the diner every few weeks, always sitting in booth 7, always leaving a note of his own folded beneath his cup, sometimes a joke, sometimes a thank you, once simply the words, "Still grateful," circled in his own handwriting, a quiet echo of the night a waitress dared to save a stranger's life with nothing but a pen and a trembling hand. Before we close out tonight, if this story moved you even slightly, I want to hear from you. Please leave a comment below and tell me what part of Marisol's courage stayed with you the most. Your comments truly mean the world to this channel and help these stories reach more people who need a little hope. Because in the end, that's what this story is really about, not mafia bosses or gunmen or danger lurking behind a diner booth, but the simple, radical idea that kindness can survive in even the harshest environments, that courage often looks like a waitress circling words on a bill instead of running away, and that sometimes the smallest, quietest choices we make in moments of fear are the ones that echo the loudest through the rest of our lives. Marisol Vance never set out to be a hero. She just refused to let fear make the decision for her. And in doing so, she reminded everyone whose lives she touched, including a man the world had long since given up on, that it's never too late for someone to be seen, to be forgiven, and to be given, against all odds, a second chance. If this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe to Shadow Boss Tales, and let us know in the comments, do you believe one small act of kindness can truly change a life? We'll see you in the next story.